Isn't this a great conference? Everybody having fun? Yeah. Welcome to the lunatic fringe of science. If you think Jerry's crazy, this is going to be a little crazier. Okay, gravitational resonance effects. I've been interested in this stuff, like Jerry says, for quite a while. I'm probably one of the achieved geezer status on all these crazy things. A number of years ago, I met a guy named Larry Wilson. I'd read this book on flying saucers have landed by Leslie and Adamski. And that's how I got started on this. The first half of the book was by Desmond Leslie, and it was an excellent book on research, and it had John Keeley, Tesla, a bunch of crazy things like that in it. And this, to me, was the new area of science. Now, this, remember, was about 45 years ago, so it was quite a while. And so I figured, well, the stuff I'm learning in high school at that time was just kid stuff, you know. So when I got to college, I was going to learn the pure quill. Well, when I got to college, it was more of the same. So I carried on a full-time research along with my college stuff, and I started meeting some really fantastic people. And one of the guys I met was a guy named Larry Wilson, who actually had free energy and anti-gravity devices working. He'd never tell me how they work, but he'd always feed me bits and pieces of stuff. And the first book I wrote was basically a lot of the bits and pieces put together that all held some credence as far as what I could come up with. And then from there on, I continued to do quite a bit of research. And one of my big areas was the conversion of the ether directly into usable energy and usable gravitational forces. In my shape power book, which was published 3 or 4 years ago, I talked about the definition of what shape power is. And basically, it's the conversion where physical shapes will convert the ether into other forces like gravity, magnetism, electronics, nuclear forces. And this was the basic concept that I'd been working on for quite a few years. And a lot of these things like Hendershot and Keeley and Tesla and all this stuff that I'd studied were to try and figure out some way to make all of this happen where we'd have usable forces from shape power effects. The basic shape power discovery was really came together when I was about 7 or 8 years ago, and there was a discussion I was reviewing on the pyramid effects. I'd been fascinated with pyramid energy for quite a while. I discussed it somewhat in the very first book I did. And I was wondering why, all you need to make pyramid energy work is to have the outline frame of the pyramid. And so I reasoned from that there must be something happening within the atomic structure of each of these edges of the pyramid that are interacting to create some kind of a force field effect. And what I came up with is that if you take a look at all the atoms within a line, within a pyramid, one of the edges, all of those atoms are interacting with the local ether. They're Jerry touched on this a bit with the idea of inertia, which is the resistance of mass to moving through the ether because it's already entrained in one spot. So when you get it moving, it wants to stay moving in that effect because you've got the ether moving through it. So what I did was I thought, well, if you take two lines of energy, like this right here, then these ether entrainment should start interacting down here at the vertex of these two intersecting lines. And I knew from all of the unified field theory that I'd put together that basically this should be a magnetic field and it should be measurable. And I figured, well, if a one-dimensional thing would do this, maybe three-dimensional would work better. And that's basically what you got in the pyramid, is you got a three-dimensional effect. Next. So I didn't have a sensitive magnetic measurement device at that time. But I have a friend named Joe Parr, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And Joe had a alpha trifield meter, and it will measure very sensitive magnetic fields. And so I called Joe up and I said, hey, Joe, how about doing a little experiment for me to see if we can generate a magnetic field without any metal? He says, well, that sounds interesting. What do you got in mind? So I explained the experiment. I wanted to put something together, non-magnetic, maybe a piece of woods or something, and have them all come into a point and see if we can measure a magnetic field and possibly a electrostatic field. So Joe's wife is Chinese, and they have a lot of chopsticks around the house because they have a lot of Chinese food. So Joe said, well, I'll take some chopsticks. So he stuck a whole bunch of chopsticks into a styrofoam ball, and he took his meter and measured it, and lo and behold, he came up with 9 chopsticks would generate a 250 volt per meter field, and 1 inch from the ball he was getting 1 millitesla, and of course away from the ball he wasn't getting anything. So this really validated the effect for me. So this started me off. I built a flux gate magnetometer, which was even more sensitive than the one that Jerry did. And the shape power book is kind of a compilation of all of the shapes and analysis that we did to come up with the theory and the concepts and how different shapes modify the local ether. Foil over a pyramid and getting a very large double helix energy field off the point of the pyramid, and that photograph happens to be in the shape power book if you're interested.